Hey guys, like I said, I wanted to release this review sooner. I was on a trip last week. Even when I came back, I got busy with family stuff, celebrating Christmas. But I've had a lot of time to think about this film, and I'm ready to talk about it. Avatar: The Way of Water follows Jake Sully years after the first film. Him and his wife Neytiri now have a family, and everything is peaceful. This is interrupted, however, when humans, which they refer to as Sky People, return to Pandora and unleash destruction trying to obtain resources from Pandora. On the run, Jake and his family find aid in the form of Navi that live near the ocean. With the new allies, the Navi must once again defend their home. So like I said in my Avatar review, I did have an interest in this film, because James Cameron is a really good director, and he's actually shown that he's especially good with making sequels. T2, Aliens are always in that discussion of best sequels of all time, sequels better than their predecessors. So I had an interest in this film. However, I did have reservations on how excited I would be, because that first film over time has been viewed as kind of overrated, and I agree. But I'll start out with the positives. The visuals are still incredible. It's still very lifelike, very colorful, and at times the CGI is actually more refined than the first, which is something to say, because that first film holds up really well. But still, with even more advancements in CGI, you get more detail. The motion capture, I think, seems to be actually improved from the first film as well. Like the first one, you forget that you watch this massive world created off a computer, and you just pay attention to the story because it all feels realistic. Like all good sequels, Avatar: The Way of Water expands on the first film, and you get to see more of this world. The first film is more focused on the Navi of the forest, but now you see the Navi of the ocean. And like the first one, where you're exploring the culture of the forest Navi, you get to see the culture of the water Navi. For example, you get to see how they interact with whales that live nearby, and it makes for a different flavor instead of just rinse repeating what came before. The action is once again well made. It makes use of those special effects. You have good looking battle sequences with aerial combat and boats getting destroyed. And speaking of the whales, there's this memorable sequence of one of them tearing through a lot of boats. There's a scene later where people are in this sinking ship, where characters climbing on walls trying to escape the water that's just rising. And all throughout, the camera rotates throughout this sinking ship. And it's one of the most memorable sequences of the movie, and it's up there with sequences from T2 and Aliens, and it demonstrates James Cameron still has his skills from those films and knows how to craft good action. And going back to what I said about this film expanding on the world, the characters also change. There's new things to explore with them. In particular, Jake. Now you see how he is a father, not just the audience character exploring this new planet in the first film. And going to his kids, the film focuses a lot more on their stories, but it's a good choice because they are likable. And in a way, it's like passing the torch. In that sense, it doesn't feel like a film that's dated. Older fans can appreciate seeing an older Jake Sully and can connect with it now that maybe some of them have children of their own, but younger, newer fans can enjoy spending time with his kids, the adventures that they go on. And final thing for the positives, the film made choices that I did not see coming. Some landed, some didn't, and I'll get into that in a moment. Some scenes do come as a surprise, and it's sometimes bold. And before I go on to the bad, let me just explain. I would still put this film in the good category. On a technical level, it is very well made. It's gorgeous. There are ideas that in concept are interesting. So I would still give this film a thumbs up. I say that because the issues that I have with this film are kind of heavy. Speaking about those ideas, I think that James Cameron maybe has a few too many of them. And throughout the film, the story just seems to be cutting back and forth between storylines. And this is kind of a spoiler warning. I'm Not going to get into anything too heavy, I don't think, but these things that I'm going to mention were not really in the trailers. The style of storytelling differs from that first film because that was more straightforward. People finding this planet and we explore it with Jake. But there's a storyline about Jake and his family trying to become part of this tribe of ocean Navi, this villain tracking down Jake to kill him, Jake's oldest daughter trying to figure out her birth because she's the offspring of Sigourney Weaver's Avatar from the first film. And the fact that there's so many ideas, it kind of makes sense because sequels tend to go big. The film is over 3 hours, and James Cameron, I think, could have still pulled it off, except that the story structure and the pacing really doesn't help at all. I found a lot of this film to just meander. For example, we learn about the villain's plot. The film leaves said plot point, and it's like 30 to 40 minutes, or at least what feels like 30 to 40 minutes, until we get back to it. Jake's daughter tries to learn about her birth, almost dies as a result of trying to figure out the truth. And for the rest of the runtime after that, the film doesn't expand on what happened, unless I missed something, which I really don't think I did. Now let's talk about that villain. And this film brings back Stephen Lang's character from the previous film. And within the first few seconds of his intro, I was like, this is stupid. There's this exposition where it's explained that they have this character's memories for some odd reason, and then they're put inside this avatar body, and I just thought it was a very cheap way to bring back a dead character. Putting that aside, though, the simple fact that he returns is lazy, and there's 2 reasons. One is for originality. When you look at James Cameron's other 2 sequels, Terminator 2 Judgment Day and Aliens, those 2 had increased and different threats in each of them. In T2, you go from the T-800 in the first film to the more lethal T-1000 in Terminator 2 because it's made of liquid. In Aliens, you go from the one xenomorph in Alien to many more xenomorphs, and the ending, which has that huge xenomorph queen. But even taking away originality from those 2 examples, which this brings me to my second reason why bringing back this character doesn't really work. The T-800 from Terminator is interesting. The xenomorph from Alien is interesting. The returning villain from Avatar really isn't. He's just this hard-ass military guy who gave a good line here and there, but that was just it. But James Cameron tries to actually do something with him this time around. We learn that this human character that lives with the Navi is actually his son. He captures his son and uses him in order to help track Jake Sully, and James Cameron tries to set up this father-son dynamic, which isn't a terrible idea, actually. It would add meat to a pretty bland villain. But like I said, the film meanders from plot point to plot point, and you're never allowed to latch on to this possible dynamic. I think I mentioned in the other review that I hoped Way of Water would have a story that feels like it needs to be told. A story that was worth the wait. Where James Cameron used his time to analyze the impact of that first film as well. But it unfortunately feels like the majority of that time went to other places besides the story. I also said that I wanted Way of Water to have a justified existence. And I think it kind of does, actually. James Cameron intros storylines and ends the film in a way that doesn't give us answers, and it sets up a third film. Unfortunately, those ideas get caught up in the meandering, like I've said, and I wasn't able to get invested. I walked out of the theater thinking, who cares? To wrap all of this up in a statement, I would say that this feels like a middle chapter. James Cameron is certainly heading somewhere, but he wants to spend as much time in Pandora as he possibly can, so he's just stretching everything out farther than it needs to go. Pandora is an interesting ambiance. It's beautiful. Of course, it deserves to be explored. And James Cameron doing things on a technical level is what makes this film still good. And James Cameron is a talented storyteller. As a matter of fact, the character stuff in this film is a notch higher than it was in the first Avatar. But it's just frustrating because there are scenes that show that he does have substance there in the story, that there is something that you can latch onto, but it's not fully brought to light because his attention just keeps going somewhere else. I'm going to give Avatar: The Way of Water a B-. Stay tuned for my next video, which is actually going to be, I think, my last movie review before my Best of the Year video. This was a movie that I saw months ago, and I realized I had to watch again to process it more, but now I'm ready to talk about it. I'm not going to tell you what it is, you'll just have to wait and see. But I'll see you then.